Well, it's a fascinating story. I wanted to take you back really to your childhood, growing up in a medieval house in Grafton Regis, a small village in Northamptonshire. Was there a lot of stuff knocking about the house?
Yes, it was a very rambly house. I mean, it was very large, and it certainly dated from medieval times and afterwards. And my mother was very keen on collecting stuff, which she did assiduously.
And so, what did you know about this bed when you were growing up?
Well, not much. My mother set off to an auction sale. She was apparently going to get two single beds for two of my sisters. I've got six brothers and sisters. There were seven of us there, and well, six originally. And she set off to get two single beds, and she came back with this enormous pile of heavily carved and gilded wooden stuff. Which she'd bought instead. And my father was a long-suffering chap, very practical. He ran a factory in part of the house, and he assembled it, as he did in each house that they lived in subsequently.
I love
And
the sound of your parents. I love the way your mum went out to buy a couple of beds for your siblings and comes back with this piece of wood
well, she
and
did. She drove a Dormobile van. In fact, she learnt to drive and passed a test in a Dormobile van, like a transit. And she used to go off and buy stuff. And it was, she really enjoyed doing it.
so
And
your dad put up the bed. And what did it
yes, he
look
did.
like
Yeah.
when it was up?
Well, gosh, it looked pretty magnificent. I mean, I was quite very small. I was only 10 or so, and it was a very posh looking thing. And it had sort of gold, very heavily carved finials at the end of it. And they had little holes in. And it always looked to me like it was where you'd put a cigarette when you were busily doing something else in bed. You put your cigarette in these holes in the finials. And I was talking to my brother about this the other day, literally the other day, 30, 40 years later. And he said that's exactly what he'd thought as well, which is rather nice, really.
So fast forward. I mean, how did you come to discover how special this bed was?
Well, it obviously was special. I mean, people don't go around building this kind of kit unless it's for some special purpose, but we didn't know what it was for. And we didn't know until years later when my parents and I, in fact, we went and restarted a derelict woolen mill in West Wales that hadn't been used for 20 years. I learned to weave and started making cloth and have done ever since, in fact. And we assembled the bed for visitors to the mill to look at. And a chap called Clive Wainwright from the Victorian Albert Museum, who was a terrific guy. He wasn't a sort of academic historian, but he was keeper of furniture and terrifically keen on stuff. You couldn't, at a party, he's the sort of man who'd either bore you to death or you'd be enthused and want to go to Africa on a mission or something. And he was that kind of person. And he heard about this bed. He was trying to get back stuff that had been lost from various stately homes and palaces like Westminster. And he heard about the bed in West Wales and he came whistling down to see it and said, that is the bed. That's the bed that was built for the monarch to sleep in.
Because
And
he'd showed a picture of this bed, hadn't he? And the Telegraph journalist had
yes,
happened to
that's
be in the
right.
audience.
Because
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. And then he thought, blimey, that's the job. And
So
it was
down he came. I mean, and they wanted Parliament wanted this bed back, didn't they? Which turned
yes,
out to be, it was originally in the Speaker's
yes,
house in Parliament,
that's
wasn't it?
correct in the state apartment. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So did your family want to give it up?
Well, I have to say that the good old government, whoever it was, they paid for it, which was very charming of them. But my parents actually could have got considerably more money if they'd sold it privately, because some mad American would have loved this thing.
Yeah.
But in actual fact, I think honestly, they were really rather they were getting older, and they were really rather proud that having kept the bed safe, because if my mother hadn't bought it, it might well have got cut up to be turned into sort of architectural furbelows or something. And so they kept it safe for all those years. And then for it to go back to its original place, I think my parents were quite proud of that.
Well, how much did the government give you for it?
I don't, do two or three people have asked me that in the last few days. And I swear to you, Kathy, I honestly don't know, but I'll find out. But
Yes,
I
please do,
really
and
don't know.
come back on the show and tell us. Because of course,
Well, it
since
wasn't enough to change our life, that's for sure. I can
that's a
tell you
shame,
that.
isn't it? I do love the sound of your parents. They sound very eccentric in a wonderfully sort of British way. But I mean, since William the Conqueror in 1066, there'd been a tradition, hadn't there, that monarchs spent
Yeah.
the night in the Palace of Westminster before they ascended to the throne. So the question is, should King Charles spend the night in your parents' old bed?
Well, I think he should, because the last one that did was George IV, who slept in a special bed in Parliament, and they built this one. And presumably Edward VII, he didn't live in it, and nor did the others. But
Yeah.
do you know, with all these strikes, there could be a tube strike, and the king can't get to Westminster, and he'll, he can spend the night in the palace, and he'll be on tap the next morning.
In
You
your
see, it'll all
mum's
go
old
out
bed.
nicely.